Mr. Donovan, let me ask you, in 2006, Indonesia passed a law requiring minority religious groups to collect signatures from the local majority group before building houses of worship. So since the passage of that so-called religious harmony bill, more than 1,000 Indonesian churches have reportedly been shuttered and untold numbers of others have never been built. So to what extent do you plan to make religious freedom a priority in your dealings with the government of Indonesia?
Thank you, Senator. Obviously, every society and every government and every country is judged in part by the way that it treats its minorities. Indonesia, within the Indonesian Constitution, contains guarantees of religious freedom. But there have been instances of abuses, involving religious minorities. We certainly urge the Indonesian government and work with civil society in Indonesia to look at those and do what they can to have, Indonesia really regards itself and is very proud of its tradition as a diverse society. And we encourage Indonesia to live up to that. And we work, again, I mentioned the Religious Commission that was just formed, but to try and move forward in that area. And in terms of my efforts on that, I can assure you that one of the priorities I will have, if confirmed, is helping Indonesia to deal with issues involving religious minorities to make sure that they not only are entitled but receive the same freedoms of other Indonesian citizens.
We had a hearing here last week in the subcommittee about child marriages, which I think is a misnomer because a marriage is supposed to be a consensual relationship between two people. In the case of a 14 or 13-year-old, I don't think that's accurate. In fact, I know it's not. But in this particular case, about protecting women and girls abroad has become a major priority of U.S. Policy. In your view, what more can the Indonesian government do to protect women and girls from the rampant abuse and to promote more equality for young women and girls in the country, for all women and young girls in the country?
Thank you, Senator. Certainly one area would be to shed a little bit more light on this and to make sure that the Indonesian people are aware of issues like this going on. I think certainly when you look at public opinion polling in Indonesia, there is a great desire to move forward, to protect the rights of minorities, and I think practices like this, one of the things that we can do is work with civil society organizations to make sure that the Indonesian people are aware of what's going on.
Mr. Symington, I want to ask now about Nigeria for a moment. The independent bipartisan U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom has recommended that Nigeria be designated a country of particular concern. Here's the quote from their report. Quote, "The Nigerian federal government fails to implement effective strategies to prevent or stop terrorism and sectarian violence, and it does not bring to justice those responsible for such violence, thus fostering a climate of impunity," end quote. In your view, why has the Department of State failed to make this designation, and do you believe that Nigeria has the capacity to improve religious freedom conditions, particularly by more fully and effectively countering Boko Haram and sectarian violence? I guess the first question is the most important, is in your view, why hasn't that designation happened?
Senator, thank you for both this question and the previous question about the importance of religious liberty. I don't think that there is a single issue more important in Nigeria than that the country continue to be seen by all of its citizens as a country that protects the rights of each one of them, regardless of what their religion is. This issue comes up every day. It's true that in the Northeast, most of the victims of terrorist attacks are Muslims, but there are conflicts that continue to try to rip the country apart and try to rip it apart along religious lines. I think that the single most important thing that we can do is to stress every day that the notion e pluribus unum, out of many one, is not an idea that is just American, but universal. And at the core is belief. And at the core is the individual person. We have spoken to and will continue to engage with not just the president, but with state and local leaders, with religious leaders, with civil society, throughout the country in Nigeria, and if confirmed, I look forward to contributing to that. Senator, I don't know the answer to the question regarding the designation, and I'll find it out and submit it to you.
Well, let me then, in closing, ask you, in general, do you believe the Nigerian government and its security forces are taking sufficient steps to protect civilians, especially young girls, from human rights abuses such as kidnappings and forced conversions?
Senator, thank you again. I think that not just the Nigerian government, the Nigerian people and their partners, including the United States, need to continue and increase the steps that we take. Boko Haram and others have been reduced, but awful things continue to happen on a daily basis. And in a country as vibrant and as important to its own people and to the world as Nigeria, we can't stop where we are. We have to go forward together. There literally is nothing more important. There is a bond of trust that must be forged between the people of any place and the leaders of that place. And when that's threatened, it undermines all governance, all justice, and all opportunity. Forging with them that bond to make it stronger is essential for them, but also for us. For as we think about the world ahead, I can't imagine a more important relationship than the one that we have with the African continent. And I think it begins, our efforts there begin by thinking about individual people and starting with conscience, a fundamental freedom as well as a right. Thank you, Senator.